The theme verse for this praise and worship is, we have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. It enters the inner sanctuary behind the curtain, Hebrews 6:19. So now before I get into the pillars of that verse, where it's seen in the Bible, and then some personal experiences that you might be able to relate to, I actually want to dive into the technical pieces of an anchor. And I'm an engineer, so you had to have seen this coming. The Nimitz-class aircraft carrier is the largest ship in the United States Navy, which makes it the largest ship of any Navy that roams the globe. It has 2 active flight decks, about 5,000 people, and 80 aircraft on it. I mean, it's really a marvel. It has 2 Navy standard stockless anchors, one to port and one to starboard, each weighing about 60,000 pounds. Each chain link, just the link of chain, weighs about 350 pounds. And a bunch of chain links together make what they call a shot. So each shot of chain has about 57 links and weighs a total of about 20,000 pounds. So when you add all this up, the total chain length is 1,060 feet and weighs about 360,000 pounds. And so when you factor in that there's 2 of them, the aircraft carrier has 750,000 of a million pounds of anchorage weight that it can use. So now the question is, can this ship anchor in 1,000 feet of water? I'm not talking way out in the ocean. I mean in shallow water, 1,000 feet. And the answer, surprisingly, is usually not. And why is this? Well, it's not the anchor that determines if the ship will hold, but rather the ocean bottom. See, most of the areas in shallow water are just too sandy, and it's not sturdy enough for the anchor to hold. In the same way, there's a lot of coral reef near the shallow waters, and those coral reefs may hold the anchor for a bit, but they're brittle, and they'll break as soon as the ship starts to move. So actually, a lot of surveying is done to find the proper place to lay the anchor, which the best place to lay an anchor is an area that has a combination of clay, shale, and sand. And what's really interesting is that sailors will sometimes take the anchor, put it on a small boat, and actually drop the anchor farther away from the aircraft carrier where they know that there's stable, good ocean bottom flooring that can hold the ship. So I'll get back to this in a second, but I want to go back to the verse, right? The verse that we have as a theme in praise and worship has 3 pillars, and I'll read it one more time. We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. It enters the inner sanctuary behind the curtain. So the first pillar of this verse is actually implied, and it's the concept of refuge. So the areas, the passage before this verse really talks about why it's so important to have a good, sturdy base in Christianity and with Jesus. And it all comes back to the concept of refuge. It's something that we seek in our daily lives, and it's a sense of safety and security that we can find. The second pillar is anchorage. So just like an anchor prevents a ship from swaying away, we want to make sure that we're grounded in something secure so that when a hardship comes our way, we don't sway off into an endless sea. And the third is inner place. And that is something that's actually interesting and can be very quickly overlooked in the verse. Let me read the last part again for you. It enters the inner sanctuary behind the curtain. So what is this inner place? Well, as I mentioned before, as sailors will sometimes move an anchor away from the ship, our anchors are actually based in something away from this worldly environment that we can touch and feel. Our anchors are based in Jesus Christ. And that's why the verse says, an inner sanctuary behind the curtain. It's almost something that we can't touch and see, but yet it holds on to us so firmly. So you put all 3 together, and you get Christ has anchored our hope of refuge in the presence of God, the inner place. So to move beyond spiritual immaturity, Christians need to experience a sense of confidence in their faith. And that foundation needs to bring an assurance that needs to come naturally, right? So I want to reference a couple chapters earlier and the story of Abraham. It's a very familiar story, and it's the time when Abraham was asked to sacrifice his son. So let me read the verse, Genesis 22. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah, sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Now this is the important part. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded up his donkey. My dad will tell me to go do something, and I won't do it for a week. God asked Abraham to kill his son, and without even thinking about it, the very next day, without missing a beat, he loads up his stuff, and he's well on his way. I mean, how did Abraham have such conviction to just be able to get up and do something where he's cutting away probably one of the most important worldly things that he has in his life? Well, the reason is Abraham had his faith grounded and anchored before he went through those hardships, before he was tested. And just as a ship cannot anchor in the middle of a storm, you will most likely not be able to anchor your faith in the middle of a hardship. So now I want to move into some examples in my own life that you may be able to relate to. And anchors in my life are what I'll refer to as threads of life. They're the different things that we hold on to that really help us get through those really difficult times in our lives. So for me personally, I would say one of my biggest anchors or threads would be my family. I always know that my parents are just a text or a phone call away to help me get through something. I'd also say something a little more tangible would be the gym. I always like to work out. It's an area for me to de-stress. Anywhere I go in the country or the world, there's always a gym relatively close by, so it's easier for me to get in there and have something that I'm familiar with that helps keep me grounded and centered. A couple other examples of some, what I'll call threads in life that you may hold on to would be your friends, your son or daughter, significant other. You always know that they're there, regardless of how bad of a day you're having. Your education or your job. You may base your confidence on the highest degree that you've achieved, or you may base your sense of purpose in your occupation and what you do and what you get out of your job. Money or material possessions, right? Many of you probably own a house, and well, even if I lose everything, at least I still have my house, or at least I still have my savings in this bank account that I can always fall back on. And others may just have a hobby or an interest, like painting, snowboarding, surfing, whatever it might be, that it's just where you go, and it always keeps you grounded. Unfortunately, about 3 months ago, I actually got COVID and had a really bad experience with it. I had very severe symptoms. It lasted a full 2 weeks, and I ended up in the hospital for a couple of days. And during that experience, a lot of those threads were cut away from me or were at risk of getting cut away. So, like I mentioned, I love to go to the gym, but when you have COVID, your health is not quite there, and you can't go to the gym, you can't run, you're having difficulty breathing. Family, so my dad also got COVID, and it was very scary because he was just in a different room. I couldn't go talk to him, and the mortality rate for his demographic was relatively high, and it was a very real possibility that I would lose my dad. Financially, so my job didn't set up my insurance properly, so I had to pay all that out of pocket. If you don't get anything out of this sermon, at least take away that you should just have your insurance set up properly now. Just get that taken care of, because it was just a total mishap. But if you don't get anything, at least do that. But just generally, a lot of the things in life that held me down were taken away or were at risk of getting taken away. And when you lose so many of those worldly threads, the world just becomes very quiet, right? And even for those that haven't had COVID or gone through something like that, we've all experienced this in the past year of the world that we live in. You may not be able to have had those distractions or anchors that help you get through life. The past year, we haven't been able to go out with friends. You may not have been able to travel. You may have gotten laid off from your job. You may not be able to go to the gym, right? And you may experience situations where your threads are being cut. And when that happens, like I said, the world starts to get very quiet, and it's just you alone with your thoughts. But there is one thread that I had. And there are times in my life where I felt like I was just hanging on by a thread, by one thread. And if that thread were to break, I would have made very bad decisions with my life. But thankfully, that thread was my faith in Christ. And what I came to realize is that a whole web of threads that are based in the world don't even come close to a single thread based in Jesus Christ. Let me say that one more time. A whole web of threads based in worldly things will never come close to a single thread that is grounded or anchored in Jesus Christ. So not only are these worldly threads not the best place to lay anchor, but they're actually guaranteed to go away. I mean, there will be a day where you will lose a loved one. There will be a day where you will not have the energy or the physicality to go work out. There will be a day where you will not be working at your job anymore. And all those days will be coming. And when you lose those threads sooner or later, what are you going to fall back on? And if the answer is not Jesus Christ and our spirituality and God, then you're going to be getting swayed away into an endless sea. And it is the only thread that is guaranteed in this life. So to close, like I said, all those threads that we feel that are so secure and so tangible and right there in front of our face are guaranteed to go away. And there's only one that will be here to stay. And let me reread the verse. We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. It enters the inner sanctuary behind the curtain. So with that, I implore all of you that are listening to make sure your faith is grounded in Christ today. Because if you wait until life gets difficult and you go through hardships, it will just be that much harder to find your footing. Thank you, and God bless.